A few months ago, our adoption agency called us and they asked us if we could send them a picture. And one of the things that Agape usually does with their newsletter, every few months they'll put it out, and one of the things they'll do at the very back of that newsletter is they'll put pictures of different families that have finalized their adoptions. And so I said, yeah, we would be glad to send you a picture, but my question is for you, do you want a picture of Dawson or do you want a picture of our whole family? And they said, we want a picture of your whole family. I said, well, that's no problem at all. So basically, what are you looking for? Anything in particular? She said, basically, we just want a picture of everybody smiling, looking at a camera. And that's the problem. And some of you may know what I'm talking about if you've ever gone to take a family picture before. Something so simple as getting everybody to look in one direction at one time and actually smile seems like an easy task, but it is quite the challenge. In fact, my wife is a photographer and she regularly does family photo shoots. And before we had kids, I was the guy that would go with my wife to help her in those shoots. And while she's taking pictures, I'm actually standing behind the camera doing stuff like this. You know, I'm making faces, I'm slapping myself, putting leaves on my head, anything to get the kids' attention, to make them laugh and to not let them cry. But meanwhile, while you're trying to get this picture, Grandpa's in the picture making a joke, making everybody laugh. The dog's running away. Mom is changing a stinky diaper. The husband and wife on the way to the photo shoot, they got into an argument with each other. Then the camera's getting ready to say cheese and they're like, you know, it's amazing how you can go from one emotion to the next emotion. And so I've seen it before and I've been there. So when we heard that they wanted this picture, my wife started going through our Google Photos, was trying to find just one good picture, and we just really couldn't find one. Now, there's pictures of all of us, but not really one of everybody smiling, looking in one direction. And really it's mainly because of one of our children, our middle child, our youngest son, Cameron. Either mean mugs, which is basically he sticks his tongue out, or he flexes in a picture. I mean, he's not really interested in just doing a normal smile. So we were going through trying to find something. And so I think the fact that they needed a picture inspired her to want us to go get some pictures done. So that's exactly what we did. So we have a buddy that goes to church with us that's also a photographer. And so we basically said, hey, why don't we do a photo swap? You take pictures of our families, we'll take a picture of your family, and that way we'll both get something out of it like that. So that's what we did. We went out to this beautiful piece of property, and we're all dressed up. And my wife says, all right, we'll take your family's pictures first. So she gets her camera out. And Dylan and Jody is their names. Dylan and Jody sat down. And then their two kids sat in their lap. And the whole photo shoot, all four of them smiled the whole time looking at the camera. Now, when I'm watching this, I don't want to come across in the wrong way. Jealous is not the word. Envious is a better word. Because as I'm watching that, I'm like, seriously? And I was thinking, well, maybe that will happen to us. And I want you to understand, this is not the best parenting technique. But we bribed our children on the way there and said, listen, please, just give us 30 minutes and we will go get ice cream. And so we had very high hopes for this photo shoot. And what I want you to understand about those high hopes, they died, and they died quickly. Because it was our turn to take pictures, and out of the 40 pictures we took, there was only one that Dylan said that basically everybody was looking in the right direction. So I want to show you real quick just the picture that we got. Now, this picture I'm about to show you is going to be a picture we're going to put in a Hobby Lobby frame, and we are going to put in our living room. Here is the picture. Now, it looks good and all, but I want you to understand something about this picture. It's not real. Now, you may be thinking, what are you talking about? The picture's not real. Well, my youngest son right there, Cameron, the one that is smiling in this picture, Dylan knows how to use Photoshop. In case you don't know about Photoshop, basically what he did, he went on social media and cropped Cameron's head out of another picture and put it on that one. So when other people see this picture, they're probably going to see it as my cover photo on Facebook. They're going to see it as the Christmas card. But I want you to understand something about this picture. It's not real. But we portray to other people that this is the norm, but the reality is this is not the norm. Chaos is the norm, because here is what most of the shoot looked like. In fact, my oldest son, Cruz, right there, what Cruz is actually doing, he's flipping my wife's hair over. And I wish so bad you could see the next picture because my wife's doing this, you know. And then Dawson, our youngest, she's wanting to crawl away. Cameron is making his mean mug face, and here we are trying to send this picture to an adoption agency, and our son doesn't even look like he's happy to be in our family. So, and then you got me with a face that only mom could love. But anyway, so that's the norm. And so a lot of times we look around at other people's pictures and where they're at, and we're like, man, if we could just be like that. I mean, they are the perfect family, and we are doing ourselves and them a disservice, and here's why. We're comparing other people's highlight reels to our behind the scenes. And I want you to understand something. No matter what people show you, no matter what they portray, there is no perfect family. Every single one of us have flaws. Every single one of us have defects. In fact, I think maybe social media has done a little bit of disservice in that area to create that mindset. But what I want you to understand is that perfection is not the norm. Chaos is actually the norm. In fact, maybe part of it is that it doesn't even date back to social media. I remember as a kid being in the living room with my parents, watching TV Land and watching Leave It to Beaver. And I remember when Wally and Beaver would get in a fight, they would be wrestling around with each other, and at the very end, Beaver would say, well, gee, Wally, golly, I'm sorry. I have yet to hear my boys do that after they wrestle and fight. So we look at that, and that seems to be the norm, but it's not. So I want to tell you two things really quickly, and the first thing is this, that the perfect family, it's a myth, and it's an illusion. Because even you look through the pages of the Bible, and these families that like maybe Noah, Abraham, the father of faith, you look at people like Jacob, Mary, and Joseph, David. You look at the picture of those families, and what I want you to understand about the picture of those families, there's a story behind their picture too. Because Noah, this goody two-shoes that was building the ark that everybody thought he was nuts, he was doing exactly what God called him to do. He gets off that ark, goes into a tent, gets drunk, and his kids walk in on him without clothes on. Let me ask you, is that a perfect family? Then you got a guy like Abraham who tried to push his wife on to another man. Is that a perfect family? You got Jacob, this father of many nations, but yet the one nation he just really didn't have much control over was his family when one of their sons was getting ready to be killed but sold into slavery. Is that a perfect family? And then you got a guy like David, the man after God's own heart. He was there in that part, but when it comes to being a father, he was extremely passive. In fact, one of his kids had relations with another kid, and then the other one killed that other kid. Is that a perfect family? And then we got somebody like Mary and Joseph, the earthly parents of Jesus. They lost the Son of God. Is that a perfect family? So what I want you to understand, the greatness of family is not found in our perfection, but the greatness of family is found in spite of our dysfunction. So because what the greatness of family is saying, listen, you are going to fail me, but I'm still going to stick around. You're going to have your difficult moments when you're not doing what you need to do, but I'm still going to be faithful to you. That's what the greatness of the family is really about. Despite our dysfunction, I'm going to be faithful to you. See, because I think about Jesus and his earthly family that he had, which maybe we would say is those disciples and those apostles that would follow him very closely. And one of those guys that was in his inner circle, a guy named Peter, of course, one of the things he swore up and down, he said, I will never deny you, I can promise you that. And then not once, not twice, but 3 times when the Lord needed him most, he denied him. And so Jesus Christ walks up to him, and what he probably thinks is what husbands and wives do to each other, what parents and children do to each other day in and day out. They reminisce, they rehearse, and they keep bringing up the failures of the past and using those to hurt the future. And so what he's thinking is, well, he's going to come up to me, and he's going to bring up all the things I've done wrong. He's going to bring up all of my failures, but instead, this is what the text says, Peter, I have prayed for you that what? Your faith may not fail. Do you see the subliminal message there? He knows he's going to fail. But the one thing he doesn't want to fail is his faith. He's like, hey, listen, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to slip up. But the one thing I need from you is just to not let your faith fail. To those of you that have failed, I want you to hear this. Failure does not have to be final. And failure does not have to be fatal either. Life lived in relationship is not about perfection, it's about faithfulness. And if we could just appreciate the beauty of the opportunity of faithfulness, to stick around in the good and the bad times, we could truly produce some really great families. But the second thing I want you to understand about perfection is this, that the perfect family, if we're not careful, it can become an idol. And I wish I could so badly tell you that there's not times where I am maybe tempted to be jealous when I see on Facebook this husband doing something for his wife that I'm not doing. And sometimes that jealousy does arise, and so then I do what countless people always do. They try to fix it by going and buying more, doing more. And one of the most unfortunate things that we have done today as Christians is we have bought into the American dream and idolized it to the point that it has become a god. And so what we end up doing at the cost of our own families, at the cost of quality time, at the cost of faithfulness and holiness, we will pursue the American dream instead of God's dream for our life. And what we end up finding ourselves doing is being empty, being broken, and on a never-ending path to nowhere. And so often we end up choosing this and we find ourselves in a difficult spot. I mean, here's the thing, money, it's a wonderful gift, but it can become a god. Our jobs are a wonderful gift, but if we're not careful, it can become a god too. And God gave us the family, and the family is one of the greatest gifts to our spirituality, as we're going to talk about in just a second. But if we're not careful, we can choose blood over theology, and if we're not careful, we can make the family a god instead of the gift that it was. In fact, one of my favorite books on marriage is actually called You and Me Forever. And in the very beginning of this book, one of the things that the authors say is this. They said, you want to have a great marriage, here's what you have to do. Stop focusing on your marriage. And I read that, I was like, wait, what are you talking about? He said, well, think about it like this. If she's here and he's here, and they're both pursuing God, guess what happens to them? They naturally grow closer together. So you want to have a great marriage, focus on the one above. If you want to have a great marriage, build it upon Jesus. That's where the true perfected family is going to come from. And so what is it that we're going to have to do? Well, I want to suggest two very simple things to you tonight. Two things that if we choose, we can build great families. And the first thing I want us to choose is this: time over perfection. When we were first married, we, like a lot of people, had no furniture. We had our bed and box spring on the floor for about 6 months in our one-bedroom, 500 square foot apartment. We had our TV on an egg crate, and so that was basically all our furniture that we had. And so what we would do is we would go to local yard sales, flea markets, antique malls, trying to find stuff, to build our physical home. And so there was this one right down on the road from our house in Del Rey. It was a 3-story flea market and antique mall called Eastbrook Flea Market. And I loved this thing, and we would spend, sometimes hours walking around all of these booths, looking at all of these places, trying to find furniture and things for our home. Well, one of my good buddies who went to Faulkner was actually working there, and I was talking to him one day. He said, Andrew, you wouldn't believe this, but our top-selling item at this antique mall, and actually at other antique malls in town as well, are black and white photos of families from 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. I was like, really? I was like, well, why are they doing that? He said, well, people are buying these things left and right, and they're putting them in their homes. He said they're using them as a decoration because it looks vintage. He said, but also part of the reason why people are doing this, they're actually trying to find families that look like them, and they're kind of doing it to be funny, and they'll put it in their home. He said also what they'll do is some people that are good with Photoshop will Photoshop someone's head onto the other heads and make it look like it's them. So he said people have a lot of fun with these kind of pictures. And as I'm seeing this booth just filled with black and white, huge photos of these families, it kind of hit me how sad this is. But we're putting them up in our homes as decorations. We're making jokes of it, but the reality is that's a family. And there was a time where that picture was above a mantle and at a fireplace. And the grandparents would reminisce and they would talk about the times before of what happened in that moment and how much someone grew, but now it's being sold in an antique mall. But what that told me more than anything is this: the greatest legacy that we're going to leave our family is not found in monetary value. It's not found in the kind of house we have or the kind of car we drive or the amount of size of a boat we leave. One of the greatest legacies that you and I will leave our family is the time that we give them. So we have to start choosing time over perfection. That is one of the greatest legacies. In fact, I want to explain it like this. In this jar right now are 936 marbles. From the day your child is born to the day they leave your home to go off to college, it's 936 weeks. This jar represents birth to 18. This is how much time we have with our children. Now, when you see this, I want you to understand, I'm not trying to make an emotional pool, and I'm not just trying to make you sad and make all you mamas out there cry. But what I am trying to do is to do something that Moses in the song actually described as wisdom, and it's this. He said, we need to teach ourselves to number our days so that we can have a heart of wisdom. There's a buddy of mine that in his office, after every single week on Friday, he takes one marble and puts it in another jar. And the reason why he does that is whenever he goes home is to help him understand the limited amount of time he has with his kids. And the reason why this is also significant, did you know that 2/3 of children make the decision to put on Christ in baptism before the age of 18? But we understand the reality too, don't we? We're losing our marbles. In fact, I want to show you this, if they don't fall all over the ground. That's kindergarten. That's 6th grade. And the reason why I think there's so much wisdom in numbering our days is because of two simple reasons. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to get a little bit more serious about the time you have now. And I've found myself saying this, I don't think we mean it in a bad way, but we find ourselves saying a lot of times, man, we survived those toddler days, we survived the twos, we survived those teenage years. But it's not really about surviving, is it? It's about thriving. It's about taking captive every single moment that we have. I mean, it just blows my mind. I feel like yesterday we walked into that hospital and met my daughter's birth mom and were able to take her home. Now she just turned 9 months old. We are literally losing our marbles. I have a little boy that is excited to go to camp and does not want me to be in the same cabin as me, okay? We are literally losing our marbles. But the reason why I think it's also wise for us to do this is because when we see how much time we have left, we tend to focus on what matters more and make it even matter more. In fact, one of the things I think about in Hebrew culture is every single morning, Jewish parents and Jewish children in the evening would quote the Shema. And of course, that's from Deuteronomy 6, where it says to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. And they said they would paint that on the forepost of their home so they would never forget. Because they understood that, yes, I cannot make my child follow God, but what I can do is every single week pour into that child and give that child the very best I can. There is a gigantic clock of life that is literally ticking, and every single moment is passing. And so those moments that we already have, we have to make sure that we make those moments matter even more. Time is such a great blessing, but time is passing, and how do we choose to use it? There's a book that I'm not going to read to you tonight because I will ugly cry, but it's called Love You Forever. And some of you have this book, or maybe your kids did. But basically, it's a story about this young mom who brings home her newborn son, and she's looked at him very lovingly, and she's got all these hopes and dreams, but then the reality, of course, happens as he begins to grow up. And as he grows up, she begins to understand something. That baby that she brought home that was perfect begins to do things that most young people do or teenage boys do. He begins to get into mischief. But one of the things that I love, no matter what that son did, no matter how he came home, the mom never stopped loving the son. In fact, I love what the book says. I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. And I can't help but picture that story of the prodigal son. That maybe some of you have a family member that's gone astray. They've gone to the far country. They've been living for themselves. This young man realized what he did. He decided to come home because he realized he had it better off with the father. And he tops that hill, and as he's topping that hill, you know he doesn't see on the porch? The big brother. Because I'll tell you, if he saw the big brother standing on that porch with a scoured look on his face, little brother would not have come home. You see, that's the beauty of you making the choice to be a part of God's family, the church. If you make the choice to be a part of God's family, the church, I want you to understand there's not a bunch of big brothers waiting for you on the porch. There's actually a father that is running to meet you and will embrace you, welcome you, and call you home. And what he'll say to you is, I love you forever, I like you for always. As long as you're living, my child, you'll be. And what a blessing that we have that kind of father. Well, then how do we make this happen? Well, let me tell you what we got to stop doing. We got to stop just focusing on the days before. I understand the good old days were, in fact, the good old days. But God wants to do something sacred right now. And I understand the future is exciting, it looks great, it's full of promise, but I want you to understand something. God wants to do something sacred right now. So how are we going to do this? We have to be very intentional. And when we're being intentional, what we're going to have to do is be very liberal with our time that we give our family, but also guard against it very carefully. In one of my shows that I like to watch, there's a scene at the very end of the show where the guy said, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. And to him, I want to say there is. We are in the good old days right now. I love at the very end of Winnie the Pooh, of course, he's talking to Christopher Robin, and he says, what day is it? And Christopher Robin says, it's today. And Winnie the Pooh responds, oh, it's the most wonderful day of all. Today is a gift. And what a blessing it is. The second thing I want us to choose is this. Choose authenticity over perfection. And maybe you could interchange authenticity for vulnerability, transparency. We go almost every year to Callaway Gardens for our family vacation. It's one of my favorite spots because it's free of distraction, very simple. But they had this place in there called the Butterfly Center. How many of you ever been there before? Okay, a lot of you have been there. It's just basically looks like a greenhouse with all these paths and walkways and greenery all around, and there's butterflies everywhere. And one of the neat things that can happen in this Butterfly Center, if you are still enough, a butterfly will come and like land on your arm or land on your leg. And so we were sitting down in that Butterfly Center, and this one butterfly came and landed on my leg. And I would start to get my phone out to take a picture of that butterfly, trying not to budge. But then I noticed as he opened up his wings that one of his wings was half torn, and he only had half of a wing. I was like, well, no wonder he's resting on my leg. He's worn out from trying to fly around. And so I budged a little bit, and the butterfly began to take off. And I want to tell you, when that butterfly with that half-torn wing took off, it did not fly with the grace of the other butterflies. But let me tell you, I loved watching that butterfly fly more than all the other butterflies. Because he understood something, that he is still a butterfly. But yet, a lot of times what you and I will choose to do is to hide our metaphorical torn wing. Maybe it's because of our ego and our pride. Maybe it's because of fear. Maybe it's because we have put ourselves against this perceived measuring stick that is society, not God. That we choose to act and to be like we have everything together, when one of the greatest things that you and I can choose in order to be made whole is vulnerability. In order to be made whole, we must be broken. God loves coming in and seeing those broken pieces of our life and mending them and making them whole. I want to tell you one of the greatest gifts that my father ever gave me was when I was in those middle school to high school age years, when he would tell me these stories of things that he did in high school that he regretted. When he would be very transparent and real about the mistakes that he made, about the places he would go, the things that he would do, the things that he would put in his body. And guys, I can't tell you how, even in that moment though, really, I was just kind of, please stop talking, I don't want to hear this. But then when I got in those situations, his honesty, his vulnerability, his authenticity and transparency was something that I never left. And it was something that was always on my mind when I was in those exact situations. I want you to know that your children are not craving perfection from you. They are craving, maybe I should say, expecting transparency and authenticity. There's a book that's called You Lost Me by a guy named David Kinnaman, and basically he figures out why are people leaving the church. Do you know that one of the top 5 reasons why people are leaving the church is there's not a sense of authenticity and vulnerability? People are craving it. Because everybody's broken, we're all trying to get to the same place. I can't help but think if David would have just intervened and said, listen, don't choose that. There was a time, guys, I know you're wanting to have relations with her, but there was a time where Dad made the choice to do this, and I had relations with somebody, and this is the path that led me down. I can't help but imagine if David would have stepped in when one son was trying to kill the other son and said, listen, I tried the path of murder, and every single night I'm laying in here in my bed still thinking about the guilt of what I've done before. I mean, just imagine for a second if David would have been vulnerable, if he would have been transparent and open about his struggles, how much it probably would have helped his kids. But yet we tend to put on that front because we don't want to show something, but let me tell you, they're craving it, not because we have to just spill the beans for spilling the beans. Our story is one of the most powerful testaments of what Jesus Christ has done because we have a bird's eye view of what we look like before and what we look like now. I don't care if you grew up in the church. I don't care if you did. We all have a standing different point where we met Jesus Christ and we were made new. And if we do not understand that and have that feeling, we then need to reassess whether we're with him or not. Because if we are made new, you will know it. You will feel it, and you can't help but speak about all those things that you've seen and heard. But I'll tell you, one of the things that kills authenticity is comparison. And I don't want to go too much into this and chase this rabbit, but please start limiting your time on social media because comparison suffocates authenticity. We can be so focused on when other people are and where they are and what they're doing that we miss the value of what we have right in front of us. Let's choose time over perfection. Let's choose authenticity over perfection too. In John chapter 4, there's this woman that comes up to Jacob's well. And the text says that this woman gets there at noon, and that's important. See, nobody goes to the well at noon. You either go in the morning or the evening. You go in the morning to get water for the day. You go at evening for baths, maybe for the kids at night. The fact that she goes there at noon is showing that she doesn't want to be around other people. Here's why. She has a story. And of course, as we begin to find out, this woman's story is this. She's had 5 husbands, and the man that she's living with at the time is not her husband, so she's on number 6. And so she goes to this well, and one of the things that she's doing in the middle of the day, the text says, is she comes bringing her jar, or what she does is what most people, of course, do. They come bringing their bucket. And so she comes to this well because what she thinks she needs is water from that well, but it turns out she needs something else. So she shows up at this well, and she has brought her bucket, and then she sees Jesus. And so Jesus actually starts initiating this conversation, and she is blown away because here's why. Jews and Samaritans did not talk. But on top of that, men and women would not talk to each other in public. So this is amazing that this man would talk to her, but that's not what she really notices. She notices that Jesus Christ has come to this well without a bucket. And so it's kind of funny that she doesn't understand why the well doesn't have a bucket. And so Jesus begins to talk with her, and she has this conversation about where we should worship. He's like, that's not the issue. You know how sometimes when we have a real issue in our hearts, we try to put it off on other things, not get right down to the source? Let me tell you what Jesus can do. He can dig into that very source of what you're dealing with. So he's like, it's not about that. He said, in fact, what this is about is this. You've had 5 husbands, and the man that you're living with right now is not even your husband. What he's saying is, you have tried a lot of different buckets, and that's why you're here. And I think what this is illustrating is this is us. And I would dare to say that a lot of you made the choice to come here tonight. You have brought your bucket because you're looking for something. But the problem is a lot of us will bring that bucket and we'll fill this up, but we don't feel like it is still quite satisfying us. And so just like that woman, what we'll do is this. We think, well, maybe if I get a bigger bucket, then that'll help. And so what we think is, hey, I'll just get a bigger house and we'll get, a better job. We'll start making more money and I'll get a better car. I'll get a bigger, 401k. But then we realize that there gets to be a point where this still doesn't satisfy. And so we're like, well, I'll try something again. We'll get a smaller bucket. And so, we'll minimize, we'll Marie Kondo our house, and, we'll get rid of all this stuff. And because I have less stuff, what then it'll make me a lot happier. And then we try this for a little bit, and we see that this doesn't work either. How long is it going to take for us to realize that it's not about the bucket? How long is it going to take for us to realize that we're never going to be satisfied by the size of our bucket? See, this woman ends up thinking that it's about the bucket. Jesus says, no, it's not about the bucket, it's about the well. He said, I want to give you something. And I want to give you something that doesn't fit in your small, medium, or large bucket. I want to give you me. And if you take this invitation to be a part of me, you will literally never thirst again. And so what this woman does is she takes Jesus up on that offer, and she realizes it's not about the bucket, because what does it say? The woman left her bucket and she went away. Sometimes we think, well, I think what it is I just have the wrong bucket. No, you have the wrong well. You're trying to pull from something that will not satisfy. And so maybe some of you are here tonight and you have brought your bucket. It's not about the bucket, it's about the well. And so the great news of this invitation is that Jesus, no matter what your story is, no matter what you've done, no matter where you found yourself, He has given you the opportunity to give you something that will cause you to literally never run dry. In fact, the beauty of this is Romans 6 talks about that there's a lot of people that are dead. You're dead in your doubts. You're dead in your difficulties. You're dead in your discouragement. We're dead in a lot of different things. Well, God loves to bring dead things back to life. And so as Romans 6 says, just as Jesus Christ went into this tomb and He came out brand new, that's exactly what happens with you and I through baptism. That we get out of that water and we are all of a sudden hit with the reality, it's not about the bucket, it's about the well. Because I'm now raised to walk in newness of life. Because if I carry this around, there's a limit. And if I carry that around, there's a limit. But if I'm with Him, I am literally limitless in my power on this earth, because it transcends today and goes into the future. And so maybe for some of you, you've been looking to fill your bucket. Please don't live this bucket life. Take advantage of the opportunity of the well. Maybe for some of you, you're like this woman. You've been trying different things to satisfy you. You're not choosing the wrong bucket. You're choosing the wrong well. My hope for every single one of you, no matter where you find yourself, you will make the choice tonight to choose that well that never runs dry. So whatever it is that you have a need of, please come now as we stand and sing this song.